Just wanted, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's it. Or or Huichen.
Hi, my name is and this also is my first master in CMU and a major in software engineering. Thank you.
That is me. I'm Hygiene. Okay. I'm now in Taiwan. Okay, and also it's super early here. This is my first year, first semester in CMU, and I found it that software engineering is um, so much different than the computer science engineer, the computer science. Yeah, and I found it very interesting.
Yeah, good to hear. Nice to meet you all.
We can get started with the questions then, so
Mhm.
we won't take up too much time. So I know you covered like a little bit of your role that you're a Scrum Master, but like what else does your role entail?
Sure. So basically, as a DevOps engineer, I'm mainly responsible for infrastructure, maintaining operations, that kind of stuff. So that's primarily what I deal with. And then we operate in an agile Scrum environment. So I'm a Scrum Master for that. So that's mainly. So my primary focus is basically on the infrastructure. I can also give you a brief background about Claris. So right now in Claris, there are two products that are in production. The first one is the FileMaker, and the second one is called Claris Connect. So FileMaker is really like it's a development platform. It's a no code slash low code development platform for developing apps, applications with storage in it. So with very little code or no code at all, you could create apps. So that's kind of the first FileMaker product. The second one is Claris Connect, and Connect is about API integrations. So let's say you have a type form and then someone fills in a form, you want to send a confirmation email, add an entry in your SQL database, you want to do chain a bunch of operations. So that can be very easily done in Claris Connect. You can drag and drop, hey, make an API call to this service, get a response, and make another API call from the response, get another response, and you can chain like multiple services. So today it has about 50 different services that are all can be integrated and work together for various workflows. So those are the two main products. My focus is mainly on the FileMaker, the first one. And so I am a Scrum Master for the DevOps team. And DevOps team is also kind of generalized. So DevOps is not tied to the FileMaker itself. It's kind of like just for all of the Claris, so multiple products and anything that is in development. But so yeah, so but when I'm going to be talking about, like, a lot of things are going to be related mostly to just the DevOps team in general, or also the FileMaker product.
Perfect. So what does your daily schedule look like? Or like I know it might differ, so like what's the general day look like?
So on a typical day, like I usually start my day at about like 9ish, 9 and 9:30 is when we have a stand up. So I have like a nice 30-minute break where I just catch up on emails, anything that happened during the day, last day, anything I want to prepare for, the coming day. Then at 9:30 we have our DevOps stand up. So for 15 minutes we just catch up, just go over the round. Then from 10 onwards, I basically start working on my Jira tasks. So that could include things like, either I'm writing code in Python or Terraform, creating new infrastructure, or I'm debugging some existing things. So I'm basically, coding. Um, then it's either a lot of our, tasks is our responsibility also involves like process. So like any changes you want to do to production environment. So DevOps is the only team that has access to production environment. So if any other team wants to do any changes, if there are any fixes, if there's something that needs to be filled out, so any kind of request, you just have ton of miscellaneous requests coming in. So that all is handled. So um, So things could be that, or sometimes there are customer issues, so things that have to looked into for a particular customer because they're facing problems. So those can also include. Um, then at about midday, I also attend a second Scrum meeting, and the second stand-up meeting, and the second stand-up meeting is for a different Scrum. And so we kind of, I don't know, maybe this is too much details, but we kind of have like a different arrangement where we are DevOps, but we are DevOps for different teams, right? So FileMaker and then a different product. So they have their own Scrum where, which is mostly comprised of developers and they're, developing products. And so I go and attend their Scrum stand-ups kind of as a representative of DevOps. So this is mainly to facilitate any communication between DevOps and the other Scrum, or the Scrum, or the other way. So that's just kind of like a nice thing we have, just kind of out of the ordinary. But so I also attend like two Scrums basically. So we have this communication. So that's pretty much it. Like in terms of scheduled meetings that I have, it's usually these two Scrum meetings. That's typically my day. It's the rest of the time I'm just usually doing the things that I mentioned before. Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll go a little bit into kind of like Claris, like as an organization and kind of your team in general. I know the organization's a little large, but do you happen to know like the general size of that?
Sure. So the entire Claris is about, I think, 350 people.
Mhm.
Um, so Claris is also an subsidiary of Apple. So a part of our staff or people working for Claris are Claris only, but then Claris also leverages a lot of resources from its parent company, Apple, um, which is mostly like some on the technical side, it's mostly on the infrastructure side. There's a lot of things Apple does. Like one team at Apple would do like infrastructure. They would create AWS accounts, and they would create AWS accounts for anyone at Apple who needs it. So even though Claris is its own different entity, its own company, it has its own CEO, it still uses that service given by Apple to create our own AWS account. There's a ton of stuff we do in like sales and marketing, and so a lot of our resources are coming from Apple as well. But in Claris itself is about 350 people, out of which about 150, 170, 180 is about engineers. It's in the engineering org. And then my team, the DevOps team, is about 9 people, and then a manager. So 10 people.
And then how is the team, both for Claris and your DevOps team, how is it distributed geographically?
So for my team specifically, all 10 of us are working from Bay Area. So all of us are here, present here geographically. For Claris in general, a lot of our customers are international, Tokyo and Europe mainly. So in terms of engineering org, I'd say 90% of our development team is in Bay Area. And then about 10% are in China. So we have, in terms of dev, we have two main offices. But Claris in general, we operate I think in Australia, Europe, multiple places in Europe, in Tokyo, and US. So, but in those areas, teams are mostly either sales and marketing or support.
And then I know you mentioned that you work in the Agile Scrum framework. So could you go a little bit more depth into like the software development process? And is this process similar across other teams, or do different teams do different things?
Right. So we adopted Agile about like a year ago. Before that, we didn't really have Agile. So like I joined like last year in about February-ish, and then in March and April-ish, we started this initiative of adopting Agile, and so that began with a lot of like training for all employees. But so far in the present day, we kind of adopted Agile at all levels. So all teams work in a Scrum. And then we also have, so in terms of, so you can think of, like I talked about, like multiple products, right? So FileMaker is one, Claris is one. Within FileMaker itself, there are multiple things, right? So FileMaker as a product can be deployed on an on-prem server. It can be on cloud as a SaaS-based offering. This also runs on a MacBook. There are also like Android and iOS clients. So there are, if you think about like within FileMaker, there are different like products. One is like a mobile app, Mac app, on cloud, or the server. So each of these teams have either one or two Scrum teams of their own, and then there's DevOps. So on horizontally, this is how like different agile teams or scrums are structured. In addition to this, we also have something what we called a scrum of scrums. So that's kind of like multiple teams, scrum teams, kind of representative from them meeting together in a common scrum to kind of align and um, you know communicate things that are of importance across those things. And then we also have something called a scrum of scrums. So that's one more level up, where you're just not talking about FileMaker, but also about different products, Claris Connect and others, and also not just engineering, but then you have teams from sales, marketing, and also chiming in. So we have not only adopted Agile just for our development and like software orgs. The exec team and the marketing team also have their own scrums. And then they kind of scale this up by having a scrum of scrum and then scrum of scrums at two different levels. So yeah, so that's pretty much how a lot of like information flow also happens from the very top, from the exec levels, how it translates down to like a DevOps team like me. So at the very bottom. Sorry, did I answer your question, or was there a second part to it? Okay. Yeah. So that was pretty much it. So across all teams, we follow Agile. And in terms of Agile itself, we have like a backlog. We use Jira. We heavily use Jira for this. We create a backlog, and then we operate in about sprints of 2 weeks. And then at the beginning of each sprint, we kind of go through a backlog grooming process, which is kind of like an informal meeting where the team would just group up and decide on priorities, and then just go through the backlog just to see if everything is in the correct order and we're not missing out anything. So that's kind of like the prep work for the actual backlog for the sprint planning meeting. And in the sprint planning meeting, basically we go over through all those prioritized backlog. We kind of discuss about like acceptance criteria or like our definition of done for those different topics. And then we kind of do a round of planning poker. So in remote work, we kind of use a website. I think it's called planningpoker.com or something. So we use that, we plan, we estimate our story points. We use factorials for those. And then usually we kind of have an estimate about how many story points we want to take each sprint. That is also kind of something we are learning over the last few sprints, like what is an actual, or that's kind of like a challenge or a problem we have been asking ourselves is how should we estimate our sprint? Like what should be the size of the sprint? And that's kind of have been challenging for us specifically because in DevOps, like it's kind of different from like a dev environment, right? So I can talk about like a different team, like Claris Connect, for example, that particular scrum, is comprised of front-end engineers, back-end engineers, and then they're working on a node-based project, right? And so for them, it's like, they have a scrum master, they have a product owner, and then at the start of the sprint, the product owner knows they need to get like these 2 or 3 features out. And so they define their different tasks, story points, and then they go through the entire thing. But for us, it's a bit different because a lot of the work that we do, especially when it comes to operations, when it comes to like any a customer is having some problems using the products, they call up the support, the customer support. But then a lot of time the customer support cannot handle those requests, or if something more peculiar, so they have to be escalated to the devs, right? And so DevOps is kind of like the first person who the case would get escalated to. And so a lot of times during your sprint, you would get these escalations where a customer is blocked because they cannot use a product. So it's kind of high priority, and you have to look into it. So it's kind of like work is coming during the sprint, and that makes it hard to plan the sprint because you don't know how or what kind of things you might get during this sprint. So that's kind of been like the main challenge for us. How do we account for those like work that is going to come, which we don't know about, which is also variable, right? Because every week is different. Um, so
Yeah.
so that's the planning. So that's the planning part. So that's something we've been dealing with. But in terms of other practices that we do, once things are planned up, we at the end of the sprint we also go through a review retrospective. We do a demo, kind of also do a demo with like a skip manager, so a director can also like attend our demos and then just see what we're doing. And then we also do retrospectives. um, so kind of like the standard agile practices. I guess like the major, I guess the different thing about us is really like it's been hard for us to plan our sprints because we don't know what we are going to do in the sprint. Sorry,
Yeah.
I know I kind of just went on a rant, but it's just like I'm also trying to give you like what is different for us as DevOps because when I joined this team, I personally felt like there's we are doing agile, but there's a lot that is also different um, when it comes to DevOps because just because of the nature of it and it involves operations.
I know it's hard to plan for each sprint since the specialty of your product. So I have two questions before we continue. So first of all, do you assign the same starting points for each team member during each sprint?
No, so that is
Okay.
not something we like formally enforce.
Yeah.
One exercise we also like to do is just try to get an idea of um, sprint. We call it sprint capacity. So like, what is the capacity each person is willing to take? So if somebody is like going on vacations for a week, so they're kind of like on the 50% capacity, right? There could be members in DevOps that so like we could be working on multiple things so for example like I attend two different scrums, right?
Yeah.
One is my DevOps scrum, one is my FileMaker Cloud scrum, and then I could be getting tasks from different scrums. So when I'm planning for my DevOps scrum, I need to know or I need to communicate that, hey, I already got like 12 story points from the other scrum. So I have to reduce the story points I can take in the other scrum by 12 points. Um, so it's not like a set in stone thing that each person has to take these many points. I don't even think we kind of enforce like across organization. There's a standard thing. It's really being left to the team itself. So some teams do factorials for story points. Some teams do t-shirt size. So each team kind of has their own what do you say practices. But so 12 story points in one scrum does not mean the same amount of work or complexity in another scrum. They could have their own different standards as well. Um, but yeah, so generally people can have more. So we just trying to gauge like what the available workload that person has for that scrum. and that could differ. Some people can be on 100%, some people can have work from other areas or vacations or whatever. So it
Yeah.
can differ.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that does make sense to me. Yeah, my second one is since I checked the filmmaker is a development platform like that can let user customize his own application, right? Yeah, so that means there will be a lot of like user problem, like user questions coming in like every day, and I can see there are like a lot of like problems and related to user uh, will come to the DevOps team. My question is, does those like user tickets or user problem, like you help them to solve them, does that count as a story point into your like daily work? Since those cannot be planned before each sprint.
So that's an excellent question.
Yeah,
So yeah, so we do get like a lot of different complaints just because of the nature of it. The product doesn't have like a happy path. This is how you should use it. It's really up to them. Like they could create whatever they want. And so um, in terms of whether we count it into the sprint or not, so this is also kind of we've been so it's only been a year, right, since we adopted Agile, and we've also kind of been trying to answer the very question. And even when we do it, like conceptually, so today we do, yes, we do. But conceptually, like even if the answer is simple, because we are doing the work during the sprint, right? So it should go towards the work we did for sprint. But um, yeah, it's been a challenge mostly because on how do we actually accomplish this,
mm-hmm.
right? So we it's you think about like we're using Jira, right? So Jira has like backlogs, and then you plan a sprint and then you complete it, and then you have customer issues coming in, but then they're not using Jira, so you don't have Jira task for the customer issues. It's coming either through
Yeah,
Slack or an internal tool we have. So, and now are you going to spend more time, converting all those details into Jira?
yeah,
So there was a bit disconnect just because of different systems we were using. So that's kind of like an operational thing, but conceptually, we should, um, and we do. So the workaround for that now today we have is every member would just create like a placeholder Jira task, which is just customer support, or it's just a placeholder for all the customer issues or unaccounted work you would have to do during the sprint. And then we initially story pointed as one or two, or our best estimate at the beginning of the sprint. And as we go during the sprint and we get more point, each person just updates the story points as in when they get work. So this means yes, we are updating our story points or and changing the scope of the sprint during the sprint. Uh, which in a proper and an ideal world is not it's not something you should do. Like agile is about you plan and you estimate, and then you commit to it and then you deliver it. But just because of the nature of it, we just have work coming in that we cannot account for, so we just change our scope. So the way we do it, yeah, we just have a placeholder, and then we just update those values. So at the end of the sprint, it kind of looks it kind of is a representative of the work you had to do. So when I talked about like this is like the challenge we have been dealing with, and the challenge is like the thing when you start doing this is let's say you also then you also have to account whilst planning the sprint that you may or may not have like 5 or 15 points of customer issues, right? So for example, like at the beginning of the sprint, we commit as a team committed to like 60 points, right? But during the sprint, we got like 20 25 points of customer issues. So that would mean we will not be able to complete our sprint just because we had 25 more points. So in a way, in the next sprint, we would have like 25 points that we did not do because they're kind of like carry over from the previous sprint. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's
I
what
can
I'm.
say, yeah, I can say it's like a super challenging here. And
Yeah.
you guys, I think you guys probably would act like more agile than the typical agile method. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's also like just part of the nature of the job. Like you just have stuff that is coming during the day, and then yeah, you just kind of have to adopt a hybrid approach where you make things work for you.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm done. Thank you.
So I know you mentioned that like the transition to agile was hard. So I'm wondering like what was the system, just like briefly, what was the system that you were using before on the team? And then um in particular, like transitioning to agile, you said that like you had to kind of train the team members, but what else did you kind of have to take on and challenges in that?
so before that, it was like so kind of talk about like releases. Before like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, FileMaker would release like maybe once a year, and that was also not strict. It could be more than a year. There have been times. So that was what we were used to. Our class was used to one release a year, and so that would basically mean like a huge. So that's kind of like the waterfall workflow, right? You have a huge list of features you want to do, and then you spend like 6 8 months implementing those features, and then once you're done, then you have to kind of QA or validate those changes. So then that's another 2 or 3 months where a QA engineer is validating. There's no iteration, it's waterfall. You do the development, you do QA, and then you release it. So that those so that was how it was like 2 or 3 years ago. 1 year long cycles. So we had some changes, and then we adopted this. So I think now we have a release. So now with this, one of the flexibility is also different teams has their own release schedules. Teams are not dependent on each other because a lot of times it's with agile, it's easier to plan as well. So if some other team needs something from DevOps, and it's like, can we get, hey, I need this Jira task done, and then as in the scrum we can say, okay, we can put this in the top of the backlog, and then our next sprint starts next Tuesday, and then we can take it in the next sprint, and you can be sure it's going to be done 2 weeks from there. So that has allowed us to like plan things very well and be more flexible within um, with like different teams. So different teams doesn't have to be like dependent. They are on their own schedule. So now like our core, the thing that used to release like every year now releases like within like 2 or 3 months. Uh, Recently, I think last week it was released, and then today we had a DevOps release this morning. We kind of have to do a release every 60 days, kind of like a technical requirement. But now our release cycles have reduced like quite dramatically, and a lot of that reason is just because adopting this. So now it's no more like we have a huge long list of features. It's more like, hey, in the next sprint, can we just have deliver what these two fixes, and then one small feature and have a small release. Absolutely. um, so that is the change we have seen, and we have also heard from our customers that they're very happy about this, just having more and more release more often, just hearing from us more often, and it's kind of a credit to Agile, because that's really about delivering value to the customer as soon as possible, right? Um,
And then, like, in terms of transitioning to agile for the team, was it hard to like have all the team members kind of come on board to this new process and like train them with these new practices?
right. So FileMaker, like it's an old company, right? So it started in like late 80s, late 90s. There are still people working like 20 years, 25 years. There's still people working here for a long time, and they're used to things. So when there is a change, if there will be like some time it will take for it to change. Um, But I think one thing that fueled this or drive this change, pretty quickly was also because we had a change in our exec team. So about a year, a little more than that, we had a new CEO, we had a new VP of engineering, we had a new, basically, a change of the exec team, and so with that came in the change to adopt agile, and to facilitate that, we actually went on a pretty long agile training session for the entire company. I think it was so that was at the very start of the pandemic, I remember. But so that was basically, I think, like a good necessary training where it was explained like why do we need agile, right? Like why is it good, why is it important, what can we do once we go on this path, highlighting issues that we have that we had back then, and how we could address them by adopting this new thing. So I think a lot of those communication definitely helps in order to people to know like why do they need to change, and why and what will happen if they change. Um, so those were helpful, and then the trainings were done, and then we kind of just went into it. So that was how that was pretty much how was it. Um, yeah, I mean, it is hard, right? But now, because people, yeah, I mean, when you're working for 25 years, the same thing, same company, you do get used to it. But I've seen like a lot of, like, now when I see it's been a year and people have gotten like comfortable with the new way, and actually also enjoying it. Um, yeah, just hearing, enjoying in terms of like hearing from a customer, just now is when we are actually seeing the results, when we have like a release every 2 or 3 months, and that's kind of change for people who have been here for 20 years, because it was never like that. um, so I guess knowing why, and when you actually, after a year, when you have seen those things, I think that helps people a lot. um,
And then, do you have anything like communities of practice? So, like, where people may have common interests, and then it's like separate from your development team. So then you can kind of discuss these topics and bring this information back to your development teams.
so this is kind of done in like multiple ways. Like on so we also have something at Apple called meetups. So that's kind of like our internal meetup group, where you could just set up like so you could have technical talks basically about various different topics, and it's open for anyone and everyone at Apple. So you could have a talk about like AWS, for example, like there's a new service, and then you just go and someone is presenting, and you deliver, you discuss and you get to know, and then you can bring back that discussion back to your team as well. Um, there are also various ways like how we do that in our team. So usually, if it's we also have like a weekly schedule meeting, which we called weekly design discussion meeting. So it's basically, the goal of the meeting is to whatever we are working on, and we need to design something. We're working with working on a tool that just gets data from somewhere, processes it and does something. But the architecture of it, to design it, we just have a discussion with the team to, how do we design it, whether the team agrees with the design, and also everybody knows what everyone is up to. So this is kind of also a way that the team itself is informed about what we are doing. But those opportunities can also be are also used to just talk about things in the industry. Hey, this is a new like thing people are using in the industry for monitoring or logging, like Splunk. Should we use Splunk? So those kind of discussions also happen over there. You also have something like technical technical presentations to a bigger audience in our company. So that also happens every week, where somebody would just have a topic, whether they're working on or something they're interested in. Um, so anything like any technology or any like software concepts or anything. So those are the venues where you can like share with the team or the organization, or you, sometimes whether it's important, you could just schedule a meeting as well. But to gather information, we have meetups, we have Slacks, different groups, and then yeah, a lot of just ad hoc presentations and meetings. You like if there's like a new service or a product and people want us to know about it, us as in like DevOps or people in a certain group, they would you just get an email and you just go to the meetup or join the WebEx or yeah. So there are different ways where you can like gather information, get to know about things, and areas where you can share those information and give it back to your team.
And then kind of more about the structure of the teams. How are teams formed? Like, are they assigned? Are they self-formed? And kind of, I know like you've mentioned some of the organizational structure, but if there's anything else you feel like you want to add.
So so DevOps in general is special again because this had to be its own Scrum because they support different products, different teams. So DevOps for DevOps, we all are in one team, but we also a lot of us are also people um, who are basically part of different scrums as well. So it would be so for me, for example, like I am part of DevOps Scrum, but at the same time, I also join FileMaker Cloud, a different Scrum, which is the product Scrum. Um, so in terms of DevOps, you don't really have a choice because this is the way it is. For dev for other Scrum teams as well, people don't usually get to choose what they work on. They're assigned teams um, based on their roles and their history of work and however they were hired. Um, so they usually assigned, and then as the way they are currently as of now, it can also be shuffled again. So it's not like set in stone because we are also kind of just experimenting with this. So they're also very much flexible, but they're assigned to us. We don't choose.
And then how do you reduce risk with your products, like technology risks or marketing risks, things like that?
So risks as in like anything that would happen, or is it like software risks or
Yeah, just like reducing or like decreasing the risk of like anything going wrong, like before you release the product or like marketing new releases or something.
right? So in terms of like technical risks, really the way to the answer to that is just process. So just having a process for how does the code flow to the production, how do you deploy it, um, and then DevOps is the one like responsible for having this process and ensuring that the process is followed. So in terms of technical, like I can also talk about like how the how the development works. So a developer has their own feature branch, and then they check in their code. You can run PR builds that would include like all kinds of static analysis, security checkers for vulnerabilities like npm, and we have our own tool that would do that. So that's where we basically and then we run like unit testing, integration testing on the PR build. um, but the deployment is kind of manual. You have to manually trigger an automatic deployment. I guess that's the way to put it. um, so you can deploy it and you can test it around, and then once you're ready, you merge it into a dev branch, um, and then you can manually trigger a dev build as well. When like the QA is ready to test a new feature or a new set of features, then we basically merge this code from dev to a test branch, and then we deploy it into our test environment, and that's when they would basically test. So So in terms of like risks around code, in terms of security, static analysis, I think we use tools, heavily used tools like that during a deployment. So if there is any vulnerability or things are not like fine, they would fail a build. Um, in terms of things that are already deployed, so we have like few web servers that are running or services that are running. So we leverage a team at Apple, and this team is basically responsible for doing security checks for all teams at Apple. So basically, if you have like any kind of infrastructure that is running, they would basically run all kinds of tests. They would try to find vulnerabilities and basically notify us, hey, your Redis server is not authenticated, or it is not using TLS, or it's open at this port, whatever. So they have their own. So that team is basically responsible and kind of like pushing us on our toes. Um, so that's one for what is deployed. But so in terms of like the security for the user, because it's really in a product where a customer can have their a whole bunch of data basically in their old application, and we have customers like hospitals and library, and like for them their data is important. um, so in terms of like failures, we have like disaster recovery processes. So that goes in detail, and what if like the entire AWS region like catches a fire or goes down? So how do you recover the state of the application? So we have like thorough disaster recovery processes. In terms of data, like backing up data across regions. So you don't lose it even if AWS goes down. If anything goes down on the instance, then how to bring it back up. So just processes around if anything from like the anything happens on AWS side, if anything happens, how do you bring it back? So that disaster recovery is another thing. Um, yeah, so we have code, we have things that are already deployed, and then Apple also has a bug bounty program, so anyone in the public can identify potential bugs on these services, and if they do, they get paid for it. Um, so this, and then just acts and processes around changes in production as well. So not everyone is allowed to access production accounts, and whoever it is, it's managed through what they can access. So it's not like everybody has an admin access, everybody has privileges. um, so reducing that, and also uh, for certain things, either your application or part should have a way to easily recover very quickly, or it should have some form of a blue or a green approach. So this way, if anything goes bad during your operations, either you can recover very quickly, or you can just switch from one instance to a different, from a green to a blue. um, so I guess that's how we really manage this in terms of code, in terms of things, services that are already deployed, in terms of if a disaster or something bad is to happen. And anytime you make a change in production, like you have, the process involves like having a change document. What are you actually trying to change? Who is changing it? Why are you changing it? And then when you're actually changing it, having someone shadow you, somebody accompany you, just so, because if it's a manual thing, you want to have someone just looking over you, just so you don't make any mistakes.
And then on which part of like all of your tasks do you think your team spends most of their time, like development or like handling customer support issues or anything else?
I think the number one has to be development. It's just about, it's either something in the infrastructure, some other tooling we are trying to develop, um, or just something new we are trying out. I think most of our Jira tasks are about doing something, which is coding, like either creating something, changing something. or adding something. Um, After that, I think it would be dealing with customer issues. So it could be something you have seen before. So it could be as simple as just looking at a workaround, a documented step, and then just performing that step. It could be something you have never seen before, and then you would have to kind of just debug through logs and then try to just get evidence and see why it is behaving this way. And then sometimes you might have to contact developers, to get help from them. Um, all of our product is based, FileMaker Cloud at least, is based on serverless AWS infrastructure. So it's all Lambda functions, API gateway. And so that makes going through logs a bit harder, I guess. Um, that's just it's just a personal experience I've heard, but yeah. Um, yeah.
Yeah, hi, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the risk management. You said that you have a disaster coverage, or the yeah, team is the team that is totally dedicated on the disaster coverage,
So there
or
was
it
you
is
were cutting
just
off a
a
bit.
part of the function?
So you were cutting off a bit. So correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't get you right. But is your question if one team is looking into disaster recovery process or?
Yes, you just said that there is one team that the job is to recover from the disaster, and I want to get is that the whole task that team did is a dedicated team, or is it a function that every team would have?
So there's a bit of clarification. So disaster recovery is something we do, our team does, and so basically when you have a product, right? So when you get a product, and you must have seen like a lot of product have like certifications to them, like this product is ISO 9001 certified or SOC 2 compliant. So a lot of these products have these certifications, and a part of this certification process is having a disaster recovery um, plan. So this is really about, so this is all done by our team, and it's really about, what does your application use? My application is using EC2 instance within server in it and a database in it, and so and in an AWS account. And so in this plan, what you basically do is see what are the different things that can fail. My application can fail, my server can fail, AWS can fail, different things can fail. And then you kind of just have to create a plan about what will you do if one of those things fail in order to bring back your service. So it is kind of that document, anything, whatever wrong that happens, what can you do to bring it up? Um, so this we did kind of like a few people in our team, worked on this, coming up with this plan. But all members in our team are well versed with the plan. They know what the plan is about and how to do it. And that is because all members in our team go on call duty. Do you guys know what an on call? Okay, you know, no. So they go on call duty. So when you're on call, anything that happens wrong in production, you get a call, even if it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m., it doesn't matter. So if anything, like if AWS like goes down at 3 a.m. and you're the person who's on call, so you should know basically what needs to be done or how to drive it or what needs to, you are prepared for it basically. Um, so the plan itself is kind of owned and known by us because that's kind of specific to our plan, right? It's specific to our product. The team that I was talking about, which does things for all of Apple, is they just manage information security. So they're all about security. So they know, like teams at Apple are using Java, they're using web servers, they're using Node, they're using Python. They know what teams at Apple are using. And so this team is basically responsible about trying to do one of the things they do is security scans on all of these different infrastructure that different teams are using. So if I'm running an Nginx server with some node code in it. So they know that I have this instance because it's within Apple, right? Apple has access to it. And so they're just going to run scans on that instance, just trying to find vulnerabilities. So they're kind of like playing the bad actor, right? If you're a bad actor, if you're a malicious hacker, for example, and you have this instance and an IP address and you're trying to break into it. So you're trying to find vulnerabilities on that instance, right? So this is what the team basically does. They try to identify vulnerabilities posing as a malicious actor, but they're really working for Apple. And then if they find one, they let us know and then we go and fix it. Um, so this kind of operation is, it doesn't really care about what the product is or what I'm actually running or how to recover it. They're just trying to see if there's any vulnerabilities in your product. So that's kind of generalized, and that's why they're able to have one team that does it for the whole of Apple.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that like the deployment process is a lot of like manually triggering the deployment. So are there like any specific platforms or services you use for deployment?
Sure. So we heavily use Jenkins for this. For various technical reasons, it's Jenkins we host on our on-prem server. So it's Jenkins, running on our Office server. And so a lot of our deployment is really about, so we run like serverless AWS infrastructure, right? So it's all AWS Lambdas and API gateways and CloudFront distribution. So yeah, our build process is basically a pipeline that would get code from an environment specific development branch, and then basically package all the code and then deploy it on AWS Lambda. And those are just a bunch of like AWS API calls. You can think of it that way. So that's pretty much what we use Jenkins. We use Jenkins for deployment. We use Splunk for monitoring. So Splunk is where all our application logs go to from CloudWatch. What else do we use? So those are the main two things I would say for the applications, at least for the deployment, is the Jenkins.
And then I know you mentioned some of the roles are like through your team are the product owner, and then you're the scrum master, and then you have the engineers. But are there any other specific key roles, or is it just kind of those three?
So we have product owners. And we have product owners and we have product managers, PM and POs, and they both kind of have different roles or functions. So our PO is mainly responsible for high level roadmap like objectives. So they are the ones coming up with very high level requirements about what the direction of the product should be. Whereas our PMs are actually the ones who are, kind of adding more details to those high level objectives. And they are the ones who are, converting these high level ideas and roadmaps into Jira stories and smaller objectives. For DevOps, and so generally in a Scrum team at Claris, PMs are the one who are Scrum masters. They are the ones who would prioritize the backlog and then create those Jira stories and then pull them in a sprint. For DevOps, it's a bit different because PMs don't really know what the Jira stories or tasks for DevOps would look like. Simply because a lot of our Jira stories are very technical. It's like, update this, piece of the infrastructure or do this or so. In DevOps, the team members themselves are the one creating their own stories, their own requirements. Um, so our backlog is really, if you can think of the input to our backlog is from three different sources. The first is the team members themselves. The second is our product owner. So we also have a product owner, but um, they have occasional requirements based on basically if they need something. And the third one is our manager.
So
So
essentially, like for normal teams, only the PM is allowed to add items to the backlogs and create stories. But for the DevOps team, anyone on the team can do it.
yeah, right. Because in a development setting, like product owner knows um, what the feature would look like, right? They can write as I forgot what it's called. They go like a user acceptance criteria, right, for a feature. Like you can't really do that for DevOps, and it's a lot more um, technical as well. So they don't create stories for DevOps. We create ourselves.
Okay. Just two quick questions since I know we're almost at time. So do you create prototypes for your features before actually implementing them?
Mm, so if I'm talking about like my personal experience in DevOps, usually if I'm creating like a prototype or I do create prototypes and proof of concepts, like small piece of code just to demonstrate an idea. Um, but they're really like a stepping stone um, towards an actual solution, right? So it's very rarely would I have something where I would do something, do a prototype and show it to someone, and then I would scratch that off and then start again from scratch. Usually it's more like I spend 15 minutes to get like a minimum viable product or a minimum basic thing, and then use that to build on top of it. Um, in terms of development itself, um, I have seen people use low fidelity prototypes. They create personas, user stories, um, and then yeah, I've seen all of those happen before they actually go and code it. But for DevOps and the kind of work that I do is I don't have I never I rarely like have a prototype just for the sake of prototype.
Okay. And then so you mentioned that you primarily use Jira for like the process management. Are there any other tools that are used?
So Jira is one tool. We have our own internal tool, which is what we had before we had Jira and before we were in the agile world. That's kind of something in-house internal tool. Um, Other than that, I guess there's one planning poker tool that we use, which is just to carry out planning poker activities. Um, but this is just for the Scrum and Agile part. For the entire like process management part, where we talk about like having a proper process, deploying to production, we use different tools, internal tools as well, to kind of ensure that uh, that acts kinds of to ensure like access management. People have like right access to the right things. All of those things are handled differently. um, but in terms of development workflow, I guess we also use a bunch of like wikis and stuff. And then another thing called quip, which is similar to a wiki. um, I guess that's how a lot of our planning is done that way, at least in the remote world. um, or design documents, things like that are done through that. Um, yeah, I think that's where we track our tasks. That's where we update our tasks, and that's where we create and get our task from. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all the questions we had. But thank you so much for taking the time today. And if anything else does come up, can we just email you the questions?
Sure. Yeah. Feel free to just send an email. Sure. No worries.
Thank you so much.
All
Yes.
right. It was nice chatting with you all.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to add one more, but I think we are run out of time. So
Go for it. I can stay for a minute.
yeah. So um, actually, I have two more, but yeah. I can say how this platform helps people save time and money by customizing application for them. That's pretty good. I really like it. But for right now, I saw some of demos in the community. Only focus on the basic functionalities like text input or a chart or tables, that thing. But if the user need to but the user need can be anything, and the customizing can be super flexible. So right now, if I want to go step further, if I work in the manufacturing industry, I want to build some kind of advanced application that can, for example, manage my workflow and allows me to check my like digital models like on my phone. That kind of like high level of customization. Do you guys do that? Or if the answer is yes, is there easy to do? And so will that become some kind of outsourcing in terms of that? Like, do you still do like some kind of requirement priority for the users, that kind of thing? I know there's like a partner service I found on the website, but does that like work really well? I just curious. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent question. So, um, like on the website, it says like it's a development solution for any kind of custom apps. But then when you see options for charts and
Partner.
tables
Yeah.
and so how does that create any custom apps, right?
Yeah.
So it's called like a low code slash, it's called no code slash low code. So either you can write no code at all, or you can write some code for it.
Mm-hmm.
So usually, like on the website, and like what you would see is like the most commonly used things that are out there, which you can do to do most of your things that you would
Yeah.
generally need. Um, then there's a very powerful feature called scripting. So FileMaker has its own scripting language. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
it's very similar to JavaScript. Um, but basically with scripting, you can add like custom logic, custom things you can do. But not only that, they also added a feature where you can add custom JavaScript, not the FileMaker script, but actual JavaScript into your code. And that was very powerful because now that basically means you can include JavaScript into your application, and that basically means you can add anything that JavaScript supports. So if you want to add something that is like not available in a drag down or out of the box, then JavaScript would be the way to go. And you can just bring your own JavaScript and then do whatever you want with it. And it's a recent edition. I think it was launched late last year. Um, but that's what something you would do. But there's also a lot of like I think a marketplace for different commonly used things. So like I know for AI and stuff, like there's integrations with Siri and AutoML um, that enables like a lot of different use cases. But anything more complex you want to do, you would just go with the JavaScript route. You just use JavaScript and then do whatever you want with it in it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, it's a JavaScript plus Electron or something
No,
like that.
so
Oh, okay.
JavaScript doesn't. So Electron is really just running your. It's different. So it's completely different. It's
Okay. Okay.
yeah. This is based on this has its own different system. It's different layouts, and and that makes it easier to build applications if you are planning to write no code. Like in a drag and drop environment, if you go without, like if you go the Electron route, creating a no code solution would be very difficult.
Okay, yeah.
Having
I
no
got
code
that.
just in Electron, like you would, so, and this was also written like back in 90s. So Electron didn't exist back then.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah. I have one last one. So, uh, in case of data security, I can see you guys supply some kind of cloud storage services for all the application on the platform, right? Yeah. So, but if I want to store the data locally, for example, I have my own server that run in my company. Like, is that available?
So there are, so it's also two things. So how do you develop an app? So to develop an app, you have to download a pro client, which is like a Mac OS or a Windows client, and then you develop in it. And then that client is also able to run the app. Running the app is like using the app. And then you can deploy it to a server, and then server can create like a web app. If you have a web app, you can deploy it to a server, and then you can use it as a web app. Um, Sorry,
Oh,
what was your question?
yeah.
I was going
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I understand the whole process is like 100%
Right. So your
on
question.
the web. Yeah. So, but if I want to store my data locally, is that maybe it's not possible? Okay. Yeah.
Right. So for data, FileMaker is the database itself, right? So it has its own inbuilt database to store like records and stuff. But we also have something called as external data. So either you can have an external source of data, or maybe like a different server or a different instance, or MySQL or whatever, like a different thing which is external to your application. So you can include that as part of like the external data. You can also have something what we call as external containers. Um, so that's more like you have like a form like application that collects data, but you don't want the data to be associated to just that app. You want to like take the data out of that app, so you can store data in an external container as well. So there are definitely ways, like if you don't want data to be associated like closely with the app, you can either store it in an external container, or if you have data somewhere else, you can have an um, I think it was called external connector or container, something like that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's possible. Yeah. Or you can
Yeah.
just, and if you're in like a company and if you have like private server of data, you can just host everything in your own network. So we also have on-prem solutions, so that could also work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That does make sense. I can see how flexible it can be. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That will be all of my questions. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. And I still have a question. Do you have any suggestions about the software development process that could make carriers for more comprehensive, competitive? Any suggestions? Yeah.
So suggestions in development process that would make Claris more competitive. I think like a lot of things definitely can be improved and are improving as part of like the 1 year adaptation we have been going through. We're just getting more and more comfortable and making use of agile more and more. Um, in terms of like what we could do more, I guess one of the things is we could also look into our competitors. I know at some today we already do that in some way or the other, but kind of also incorporating this as part of our agile development process. So it's not like today it's something similar to like a product owner would go and see what does our 3 or 4 top competitors do, and then try to create what should Claris do, and then create requirements from there. But if this environment can be broken down more um, so that this feedback from the market is part of our sprint, our sprint cycles, so that each sprint we're not just iterating on what we are doing, we're also iterating on what others are doing and how we should align with it or for it. I think that could be one of the things we could do. um, One thing I feel like we also can do a better job is communicating across Scrum teams. Even though we have like a Scrum of Scrum and Scrum of Scrum Scrums, and then we have team members joining different Scrums. So this all happened because we are trying to work on actively, communicating better between the Scrum teams. And as a result of that, we had these things. But I still think we can do a better job in this, just because I feel we lack in communication between across Scrum teams a lot of times. A lot of the part of the reason is also because we are moving into Scrum every sprint. Different teams doing different things, so things are like just generally moving more faster. And when you're moving more faster and teams are dependent on each other, they need to communicate also at the same pace. So that is something I feel is definitely happening, but it can also be done better and more frequently.
Do people from the other countries like Europe or, or Turkey also join the scrums?
So I think Scrum of Scrums is really when you have like one representative form. It's like where it's at the exec level, right? So the attendees of the Scrum are the CEO, all the VPs of different products, and then maybe product owners. So at that time, all of that team is in Bay Area. So
Yeah, so how do you collaborate with people, with the developers in other countries?
so um, so my experience has been with developers from China, because when it comes to engineering, there's only Bay Area and then China. We have just have two offices, and then when that would happen, so we had two members in DevOps that were working from China, and then usually we would have all our meetings like at a convenient time for both of us. So that used to be like at about 5:30 Pacific time over here, which was about 7-8 a.m. their time. Um, so we would do that. So all our meetings would be on a convenient time. In terms of like the work we do agile, we would just work the same. They would be part of the Scrum. They would have the same what do you say, same tasks. It would all be the same. We would part of the same Scrum, retrospectives and planning and meeting. All of that would be same. um, I guess what's changed is like during the sprint, when you are working on something and you need like input from team. I guess to work for that, we would just like either just stay around like after our meeting. So sometimes our stand up would go from 5 to 5:15, so we would stay like half an hour more just to get their questions, if they had anything to ask. So those points was just to like communicate, and like if they need anything from us, we can get, or if we need anything from them, we can do that. um, so that was pretty much it. Like as far as agile was concerned, like we just moved our meetings to a convenient time, and it was fine. It worked out fine. In terms of like tasks they were doing and like just communicating with the team if they need any help, then it was just done through meetings. So anytime we would meet, we would have daily stand-ups. So every time after the stand-up, we would just stay and get their questions. And then during the day, like when we would start working in the morning, it would be their evening time. So that would be again like moment of opportunity where we could communicate and ask questions against each other. A lot of like code that they would push, all those conversations would happen on pull request reviews and stuff. So really what we were discussing, like normally we would just it was just more on a high level discussion level. And then usually once every month or so, we kind of have like an informal time as well, just to hang out with each other, just get to know, just like an informal time. Yeah. Yeah, I guess like just the meeting was the only thing like with remote, like just you can't just meet at any point in the day. I guess somebody also has to keep track of, like, if we are having or talking during the day, then they kind of have to know like a rundown of what all they missed out on. um, but yeah, so those were like small things, but usually we tackle that by just having times, or times of times where you could like communicate with them, or like times of opportunities, like either our evening time or our morning time, when it would be like their morning time or evening time. Yeah, so it worked out fine. It wasn't bad. Yeah. Right.
I think we've taken up a little bit more of your time, but if there's anything else, we'll email it to you. But thank you so much for taking this time and staying over a little.
It sounds good. It's nice
Thank
chatting with you
you.
all.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you.